the two most underrated Fast and Furious movies have one surprising thing in common thanks to Vin Diesel. 2 decades after its inception, Fast and Furious has become one of the most recognizable movie franchises in the industry, but two of its most underrated films surprisingly share a common factor regarding Vin Diesel. Having been involved in nearly every entry, Vin Diesel set a Fast and Furious record for most consecutive appearances, after featuring in the last 9 movies, excluding the Hobbs and Shaw spin-off. As a result, his character has become an integral part of the overall story, and Diesel has had a major influence on the franchise's success, making his involvement critical for the blockbuster series. Interestingly, though, 2 of the most underrated Fast and Furious movies share an interesting trait involving Diesel that no other mainline entry possesses. Fast and Furious 2009 was where the franchise started to shift into a more all-out action spectacle, with the narrative focusing less on street racing and more on high-stakes crime, but it wasn't always this way. Before Fast and Furious became synonymous with its over-the-top stunts, the earlier movies were more character-driven and had a relatively grounded storyline. Surprisingly, this produced 2 of the franchise's most underrated films, and neither of them featured much of Dominic Toretto. Too Fast, Too Furious, and Tokyo Drift are the most underrated Fast and Furious movies. While many fans often consider Fast 5 and Furious 7 as some of Fast and Furious' best movies, Too Fast, Too Furious, and Tokyo Drift are often towards the bottom of the list, suggesting they rarely get much love. However, while the Fast and the Furious may be the best of the early entries, the second and third films have plenty of charm and personality that indicate they should be looked upon more fondly than they are. Too Fast, Too Furious is often bashed for its cheesy dialogue and ridiculous action, but that's also part of its appeal. Even if it hasn't aged perfectly, Too Fast, Too Furious is still an extremely fun movie that I always get a kick out of, and doesn't deserve to be as panned as it is. Likewise, Tokyo Drift actually tries to play into Fast and Furious' earliest strength, street racing. Although the saga eventually evolved and focused on government agencies alongside life-or-death situations, Tokyo Drift felt like it proudly held the Fast and Furious banner by following a character's journey from outlaw to drifting icon. By no means are Too Fast, Too Furious and Tokyo Drift cinematic masterpieces, but they arguably have more character than some of the later entries. There are still the criminal elements and high-risk scenarios involved that the series has always embraced, but introducing a new leading character in a completely new environment proved to be effective, even if the movie didn't quite fulfill its full potential. By no means are Too Fast, Too Furious and Tokyo Drift cinematic masterpieces, but they arguably have more character than some of the later entries, and I still believe the underwhelming reception of these films is undeserved. Neither Too Fast, Too Furious nor Tokyo Drift are about Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto. Despite Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto being the franchise's main protagonist, he doesn't appear in Too Fast, Too Furious, and only has a brief cameo in Tokyo Drift, perhaps adding to why these projects are so underrated. Given Diesel is one of the first names people associate with the series, it's no surprise the movies that barely feature him would quickly be overlooked. After his role in the first film, it seemed like Dominic would be a big part of the narrative going forward, but Too Fast, Too Furious opted to continue Brian O'Connor's story instead, teaming him with Roman Pierce. Brian and Roman's Fast and Furious friendship was certainly underutilized in later installments, as they had great chemistry and plenty of hilarious interactions. Ultimately, their story may have lacked the same compelling drama of Fast 5 and beyond, but they still provided a really fun outing without Dom. In addition, Tokyo Drift focused on a new character entirely, with Sean Boswell becoming the protagonist for this unique film. The Tokyo setting provided something completely different, and allowing a high school dropout to take center stage was a fun twist that freshened up the saga significantly. Dom did appear towards the end of the movie and challenged Sean to a race, which set up Diesel's full-time return to the franchise. While this was a fun scene that helped connect Sean and Han to the wider story, Dom's appearance was ultimately nothing more than a cameo, and he served little importance to the plot. Still, bringing Dom back proved to be the right move in the end, based on how successful Fast and Furious became. But it's no coincidence that the two films he had the smallest influence on went on to be severely underrated.